Hello, everyone. Dr. Rondamariechakolis here on For Your Health. Today, I have some lovely guests, and we're kind of taking that journey where we're talking about research and a project that is going on in the community. And before we get started, I just need to say that the views and opinions on this show just represent my own. They do not represent any of the affiliates that I work for or volunteer with. So let's get into it right away. I am so excited. Last time we had one of my other colleagues here, and I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm just going to have you go around the room and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Brent Leininger. I'm an associate professor at the Integrative Health and Wellbeing Research Program at the Earl E. Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing at the University of Minnesota.
So is that just professor or is that doctor?
I have a PhD and a chiropractic degree,
That-
so my daughter calls me Doctor, but I like it when people call me Brent.
Okay, I will remember that it's Brent from here on. But I think one thing that is important, just kind of the with the project we have, just kind of give some credibility about your background and that you are making a conscious choice to work in community. And then I will let the gentleman sitting next to you introduce himself.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Doug Kennedy. I was on the program last time, and I work out of UROC's over on the intersection of Plymouth and Penn Avenue. And a lot of the work that I do is in building community relationships. I get to work, for example, with people like Dr. Ronda on our community advisory team, making sure that our team is, working with community members equitably and having interventions that are resonant with folks in community.
Wonderful. So I'll call you Brent, but I think it's important that, like I said, you have these credentials. Just kind of taking us back, where did you train, and then how did you kind of get to this whole research thing?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I went to chiropractic college at Palmer down in Davenport, Iowa. Graduated in 2006, opened up a small practice in southeast Minnesota in a small community, practiced for a number of years, and really realized that I had a bug for research. There were, a lot of questions I had as, I'd see patients on a daily basis. Is this the right advice I should be giving? You consult the literature and see what's out there. And for some questions, there's a lot of good answers. For some questions, there's surprising very little answers. And so that really inspired me to get into a research career. So that was my second career. I started working with a team that was doing clinical trials on back and neck pain and different ways to manage it, and ended up going back to the University of Minnesota, getting a master's in clinical research, and then a PhD in health policy and management.
Wonderful. What a diverse background. I kind of am partial to Palmer. You may not know this, but it's a big rugby um, area along there. And so my son was a rugby player. So definitely know that you had probably some good training in terms of chiropractic um, school at Palmer. So I think one thing I'd like to do when I have my guests on here is kind of talk about like, wow, you have these fabulous credentials. You just rolled them off with institutions that are well established. Um, I think when I got to know you outside of the professional way, I learned some things about you. Like one thing that I thought was very fascinating was your work with mosquitoes.
Oh.
You want to tell me about that, especially since we're in Minnesota?
Yeah. And ironically enough, this was when I was in South Dakota in undergraduate school, but I had the opportunity to do a research associate position, working on a project that was doing West Nile virus monitoring across the eastern portion of the state. So I was the mosquito surveillance person, me and my station wagon, setting up traps, going out collecting the mosquitoes, bringing them back to the lab, identifying them, and then mailing them off to the state epidemiology office where they would test them for West Nile. So I can, uh, once you're bitten by a mosquito, if you preserve it and show it to me, there's about a 50% chance I can tell you the species that bit you.
Wonderful. So now we'll get into like the meat and the reason why we're here. Obviously, you're involved in this Partners for Pain research project, and I just wanted to say, how did you get into this role, and how did this happen?
Yeah. So it culminated over a lot of years. Like as I mentioned before, we've been doing a lot of work in back pain, neck pain, complementary and integrative health approaches such as chiropractic, exercise, mindfulness. And the challenge was it's an area where there's a lot of need because back and neck pain impacts almost everyone. You experience it at some point in your life. It's one of the leading causes of disability across the world, especially in the US. We spend more on those conditions than any other condition in the US, more than heart disease, more than cancer, just because so many people have it and end up going to see the physician. Yet, the care and our outcomes as a nation really isn't improving much. And so that's why we've been focused in that area. And Partners for Pain came along because we've been running into a lot of barriers within the healthcare system, and there's a lot of disparities, both around how pain is experienced, right? People from racial or ethnic minoritized populations tend to have more severe pain, more disabling pain, less access, and are often treated differently. And so there was a call that came out from the National Institutes of Health, which funds a large number of research projects around the country, and they had this mandate from Congress that they needed to do research to help with the opioid epidemic. And we saw that call come out for it's the HEAL initiative is what it's called. It's helping end addiction long term. And our vantage point from that was this would be a great opportunity for us to do something around prevention and in community settings. So instead of fighting up against the healthcare system, why not take some things that we know have fairly good evidence and try to get programs out in the community where they could be easier accessed and modified. Where we could hear from people what their needs are and tailor the programs to make sure it was fitting what was really the need was in the community.
One thing I will commend you on, like usually when I have people on shows or usually when I'm in presentations or in academia, they use a lot of acronyms. I want to thank you so much for actually not using the acronyms and actually really providing people with a way where they could understand things. That is really a skill. So I just wanted to say kudos to you, but kind of want to turn it over to Doug a little bit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how did I know last time we were here, we
Yeah.
talked about how Doug and I met, and it was, I would call it like the official red table talk. Where it was like we had some words and there was some steps that came out of it. But
Right.
how did you two get to work together? How did that come to be, Doug?
Well, actually, this is a second career for me. So, my background was in working with kids. I was a teacher for many, many years. Um, and I was hired originally to do a program for teachers working on stress. That program, like a lot of programs do, ran out of money. And my research background is in how people are able to engage in behaviors across cultural differences. And I was looking at teachers in particular with that. And I've got some other research skills. So the research team that Brent was part of picked me up to do some work, and in particular for one of our YMCA studies on getting people age 55 and older to meet. And that's actually where we met.
Mm-hmm.
And we were asked by one of our community partners, you really need to do a better job of listening to community members to making sure that your interventions are meeting their needs, right? Having research be responsive to it. And I've been really lucky to have colleagues like Brent and like our other primary principal investigator, Ronnie Evans, that they've taken interest in what people had to say, and to put the time in to listen to community members. And then most importantly, what I think is that, sometimes in this work, it can be very, kind of like check a box, right? Oh, well, we got some feedback. Well, what do you do with it? And how do you communicate that back? And I think, over the years, you and I especially have said, okay, this is what we're hearing. This is what we want to do, or this is, what's being asked. Now, what happened? And then coming back to community members to share that. So even like with the program that we're working on right now, Partners for Pain, you know, we went to our community advisory team and said, well, what do you think about this? Let's get feedback on it. And then we went for it.
Yeah. So I want to take it back to Brent here. You
Mhm.
talked about this call to action, right? I think there's a lot of times where people think that when you get research funding from an institution like the NIH, that it's this easy thing, you copy paste, kind of just so that we level set the playing field. Tell me about it because I see that you two work together. Tell me how it was because what's your role? I guess I should ask you in this project is what are you listed as?
Yeah, so I'm one of the project leads, like Doug mentioned. So it's me and Dr. Ronnie Evans that are leading the project, and so we're responsible for overseeing all aspects of the project, from the community engagement efforts. Where's our team at in the community? Who are they engaging with? How are they engaging? How is that feedback being brought into other aspects of the project? Because this like when Doug and I started working together, it really was because our team wasn't doing well in a lot of those areas,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And a big problem with research is who actually shows up and who's represented and what do those findings mean to us as a population? Because often people from marginalized backgrounds aren't in research, and so the findings are less applicable, but just because they're not there. And we were no different. We were really struggling and not doing well, and that's where this, as you mentioned, the original conversations came around, like, well, what are you doing about it, and where are you at, and who are you talking to, and are you listening to them? And so that's where the community advisory team, like forming a community advisory team to that we could bring these issues to, starting to work more with partners, to be in the community, uh, volunteering with partners, knowing what events they have going on, just so that we can be there, and not that it's unidirectional. Like we have things that maybe we can offer to the community, and they recognize that we're there for a purpose too, because we're doing research, and we want to have as best representation as we can and make it as meaningful as we can.
Yeah, so you're talking about you're this co-lead, and so sometimes people don't all of these things since you're responsible for everything. What was this like 150-page document or so that you had to turn in and you have to justify um, your budget and one things like that. I think one thing, and I kind of highlighted it on the last segment, was that was groundbreaking is that your group was very intentional about including compensation for community members at the NIH rate for researchers.
Yeah.
Prior to this, had you ever been in a project that intentional about writing that line item in, or was this something that really was different for you and caused you to say, like, I'm going down a different pathway in terms of how I do research with community?
It there were steps, right? Like it wasn't like from nothing to everything. But so we were doing some pieces, like on the prior study that Doug was talking about with the YMCA. But I will say Partners for Pain has accelerated that at a high rate. Just the amount of engagement and intentionality of, even to the level of what is our team being trained in. Often it's around scientific topics, right? Research methods, whereas now we're doing trainings on, mi casa, su casa. So working with individuals from Hispanic or Latino background, having cultural humility, trauma-based informed practices, things like that. So hearing from our partners what would be important for us to know as researchers, to have training in before we are out in the community engaging with folks talking about the research that we're doing.
Talk how to push my next question to
Yeah,
Doug. We
yeah.
let you comment, but as you comment, I want to think about you commenting on how the relationship within the team evolved. Because again, this is like, from my standpoint, like fast tracking a drug from the FDA. How did you manage that change? What are the strategies that you use? And I'll give you both an opportunity to comment, but go ahead and, it piggyback on what Brent has said.
Yeah, no, I think that part about incremental change is really important, right? You and I met 5 years ago, right? October, gosh, 2019, right? It's when we had that infamous red table conversation at Milda's. And one of the things that we talk about within our team, I've shared with you, is that, when we could do like pieces, as people were like, okay, how can we critique this process? We've got a grant that's going right now, and really, a huge thanks to our community partners that were patient with us, right? We had the bi-directional communication. And then I think with Partners for Pain, like you were saying, Brent, I mean, this really was, okay, we've got a team that has been together. And when I say team, I think the really important part is to say that that definition of team has been enlarged, right? That when you go to, for example, our website, partnersforpain.org, and you see our team, it's our community advisory members, it's our consultants, it's the research, but this is the team that is doing the work. And that, along with that compensation, I think is really, I mean, it seems not groundbreaking in some ways, but it is like, this is how we are seeing this work. And I think that's really, really important. And I think in our team too, we're having a lot of training, but it's also that the team is out and in the community, whether it's volunteering. And I know our Makeda Zulu at UROC, who's Senior Director of Community Relationships, had said that engagement is a way of being. It's not a set of activities, right? It means showing up without an expectation for an outcome. It's because you're part of this community. You're talking with people, and our team has a lot of conversations around like really understanding the people that we're working with, making sure that we're remembering that we're working with people, that we're studying a condition. We're working with people though, right? That's really important. Brent, I don't know what else you might want to add to that too.
Yeah, just supplementing like a way of being, but then also making sure that you're committed to the processes and making sure that it's, that there are, and every partner is different. They have different needs, different challenges, but making sure that there's intention and we're checking in.
Yes.
And we have meetings set up on a, whatever basis based on what their needs are, but doing that for everyone, which resource-wise was a huge undertaking and is a big part of the project. And then the other good challenges is you get enormous amount of feedback, and so then it's what are you going to do with it? How can you use that to do a little better the next go round?
So it kind of takes me into my next question, even for both of you. Why would you even do this? I know when I was in school, and even now, people are like, career killer. Whatever you do, don't engage in community-based participatory research. It's, you won't get anything out of it. People aren't vested. Like all of these negative things people say. Why would you do it? And then a follow-up question would be like, has your experience dispelled all of those myths that were out there?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, I often say this has been, so I'm still relatively young in my career. This is the second project I've co-led, but I've been on, 5 or 6, 7 other projects, and this has by far been the most rewarding for that reason. Like, it's almost like you have the mask taken off, and once you see it, you can't unsee it, like all the good that comes from it and the different perspectives. And, as researchers, we're always up for a challenge and how can we make this process better? Are there things we can do? And, the training is great for certain processes, but they really don't have that lens. And so you're kind of taught a certain way of this is how it's supposed to be or has to be. And if you try to do it any other way, it's going to fail. And this has been really eye-opening towards, is that true? Can we do it this other way? Will it fail? And our experience has been a lot of times it hasn't. It's actually done better, been more rewarding. As long as you pay attention, there are some things within the methods and how you set things up that you have to be attentive to and make sure you don't cross those. But some of these other things that you were trained on or taught, I think are being challenged. And I think that's where the exciting and the rewarding piece comes when I say that.
Absolutely. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, so there are a couple of things. To piggyback on what you're saying, Brent, this was, I remember coming through graduate school and kind of worried about like what research was going to look like. And I know when I come into UROC, when I come into community meetings, when I'm out volunteering, this feels like this is vibrant, this is important. People want to be part of it. You know, it's fantastic to see people getting enthused about science, about this, you know, this pain condition, and that there's something that folks can do about it. That's electrifying. The thing that also is really exciting, and Brent, you were talking about this too, is that we are doing rigorous science, you know, and that sometimes we hear, you know, in academic dialogue, you know, if you're going to do community engaged research, it's not going to be rigorous. And I think that myth is being dispelled. We do rigorous science. I mean, the federal government is saying, yes, you know, we want you to research this. Our processes are rigorous. Our methods are rigorous, but we're not losing the human beings in it. We're making sure that we are taking the time and putting in the effort to really listen and to learn, and that's important. Um, you know, in terms of what kind of motivated like me to start doing this work is that like when we were talking years ago, I'm really lucky. This was a second career for me. I didn't know if I was going to stay in it, but there was a community member that was like, this is the expectation. And the more I talked to people, and the more I was looking at, you know, methods and looking at research, hearing some of the dialogue around it, um, I couldn't picture going any other way with it. And it was uncertain. I didn't know if I would have a job year to year in this. Um, but when I think about the work that we've done, the relationships that we've built, you know, not just in professional ways, but also in personal ways, like my work, my own life has been enriched by this. And if there's an important problem out there and we can do something together, that's that's pretty fantastic. That feels like you hit that sweet spot of kind of your purpose and your work.
Absolutely. So I wanted to go ahead,
And I was
Brent.
going to say, and big shout out to Ronnie Evans, who
Hmm.
leads our project or or co-leads our project, and also is the director of our program
Hmm.
because she recognizes like projects come and go. They have a start date, they have a stop date. Like you have to have a commitment to this
Yeah.
beyond any single project, or else it's going to be short-lived
Hmm.
and not sustainable. So big shout out to her for recognizing that and supporting that.
Can I give another shout out to that too? So like when we had talked about the methods, right, that um, this was a highly successful research team. And Ronnie, for example, is a rock star in research, long career, big grants, big studies, and that her courage to shift, right, to examine critically our processes, I think she gets a lot of credit for that too, because we're trained as scientists, you know, or as researchers in methods, and this requires a lot of agility, a lot of flexibility, and adaptability. And that's rare. I mean, that's really something to be celebrated and recognized.
I think there's something else to be celebrated. So when in this community and a lot of people I'm around hear research
Mm.
and think it's really scary. So one thing I think I've learned from you, Brent, is as co-lead, we have this thing called the IRB or Institutional Review Board. You have a huge responsibility in making sure you create safeguards so that the people in the study are represented but also protected. I want to talk about some of that IRB process because a lot of times when we're here, we don't talk about like what it takes. So, yes, we went on the stage where you wrote and you applied and you got this phenomenal, one of a kind of opportunity to work with a national institution from a Congress mandate. So, I want people to understand how it is something from Washington, from a national institution where your team was very intentional about bringing to Minneapolis, about bringing to people who are traditionally underserved, underrepresented. But you did something that I've never seen done, and that is in terms of the IRB process. That IRB process requires you to write consent forms and everything else. And I've never been on a project where co leads or a team goes back to community and says, read this and tell me what you think. I want you to kind of describe that experience for the audience, because I think that's important, because I have some comments of, like I said, I've never seen it,
Oh,
but I can imagine how you all felt when community spoke up. So want to talk about that IRB process for us?
yeah, yeah. Um, there's more regulation I could talk about too,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
that's a
I think
regulation.
people need to understand that, again, when your name is on it, it's kind of like signing for a house or
Yeah,
signing for a loan.
yeah,
Hmm.
You have put your name and reputation on the line, that you're going to make sure that people in the study are protected. And I think it's important that you kind of at least give the audience a little bit of like some of the stuff that you've done that, you have to do to make this work.
yeah. So there's a lot of processes, and a lot of them are just to make sure that A, the science is being done in a credible way, and B, that the people are protected and they'll be safe. So like you mentioned, we write the grant, 150 to 200-page document outlining everything we're going to do, who we are, what the funding, what the budget's going to look like. If that's promising, which it was, then there's some negotiation with the National Institutes of Health and, okay, we're thinking about funding this. What's this going to look like? We want you to write a data safety and monitoring plan, which is your plan for how you're going to monitor how the trial is going and what the safety, how you're going to monitor for people's safety, who's going to be in charge of that. They have you set up what's called a data safety and monitoring board. So this is an independent team of often there's a clinician, a statistician, and somebody with experience in clinical trials, and they're going to review your data independently to make sure everything is going well. People are showing up. You're not going to completely fail as a project, and that there's no safety concerns. And if there are safety concerns, they'll make recommendations for what you can do to change. And then you, as you mentioned, go to the Institutional Review Board or the IRB, and you have to submit a full protocol. What does the project look like? What's the rationale for it? Who's going to participate? How are you going to determine how they're going to participate? What are you going to do with them? What are they asked to do at visits? What sort of data are you going to collect from them? And then what are your processes for keeping them safe and for reporting if something, an adverse event is what they're called, or some safety concern happens. So
Yeah.
those are the big pieces.
You kind of piggyback on that
Yeah.
too. And I think like even just listing those out, I mean, there's so much there. And so my spouse, who is not in research, says, nobody talks like you, like if academics, researchers. And one of the things that was really striking and that I hadn't seen, I remember not getting in, graduate education and all that, was that taking it back and looking at readability, like since we're entrusted with people's safety, it, can people understand this, right? What are we going to put in place so that these aren't just, regulatory words or legal words that people are going to kind of scratch their head, and then removing barriers too, like make sure that when people come, if they're interested in our study, they have the condition, taking away barriers like transportation, finding ways that people can participate. And that was really striking because I think, Rhonda, you'd been part of that too, right? And like, let's make sure that this is readable for folks. And that I thought was revolutionary. It looks like you want to jump in, so I'm back off on this one.
It just seemed like the natural first place to start. Like you're doing a community engaged project. Like this is, as you mentioned, the consent form. So it's a document. Generally, it's between 8 and 12 pages that you're sharing with people who are interested in the research and might want to sign up. And it outlines what is the study about, what are they going to be asked to do, what are the potential benefits from being in the study, what are the potential risks from being in the study, what are their rights, can they withdraw,
Leave, yeah.
and
Voluntary.
so there's a lot of information, but it's really the gateway for most people to finding out about the study and knowing what it's about. And so when we looked at that, we thought, well, this seems to be the most important thing that we could get feedback from our community
Mhm.
partners on in terms of, how are we presenting information about the
Right.
study
Mhm.
and how can we make that better?
So I know, like, you tapped in, and it's not always about me, but again, we talked about readability,
Mm.
and then we talked about like just you leveraging, like, again, from just a personal
Yeah.
perspective, I've been asked to consult on a lot of projects, but I've never had a partner with a national grant that said basically tear up my medication form,
Mm-hmm.
rewrite it, and do it with grace. So I do commend you with that. And again, like because we're colleagues, I can go on for on and on. But I think what we need to kind of do, since we use the word clinical trials, I want to kind of
Yeah.
wrap up this thing in terms of partners for pain in a non-fancy way is non-pharmacological, which means there's no medications involved. Um, as we're wrapping up, I want to talk about like what are the key points of the study, where you're at, and then what is your vision, going forward.
Yeah. So it was a two-phase study. We just finished the first stage and phase and are entering into the second phase. The first phase was really conducting a smaller feasibility study, so kind of a test run. Like, here's the programs. Will people show up? Are they interested? Can we get enough people to sign up? Will they go to the programs? Will they attend the sessions? And then will they, when it comes time to collect data, will they collect data? Well, we did really well with that. Our participants were really great and really highly engaged. And so we're moving into the second phase where we do the actual bigger clinical trial that's testing two different programs for managing neck or back pain, self-managing neck and back pain. And they're both different approaches. They're both evidence-based. They both have exercises you can do, self-management tips. The real difference between the two is one is taking more of a mind-body approach, and so you'll be introduced to things like mindfulness and meditations, things like that. The other one is taking a more overall well-being approach to back and neck pain. So talking about proper sleep, diet, things of that nature. And they're both really good. And the whole goal of the study to see if there's differences. Is one approach better than the other? And then also see how people feel about the programs, because self-management programs, there are a few, but there's not that many. And the goal is to try to move the needle a little bit and make people give people better tools to uh, manage their pain on a day-to-day basis and make their lives a little better, which can be challenging.
Did you want to add anything to that before I?
Well, I think one of the things, we talk about like phase one, phase two of the study is that I, a lot of times when we think about like scientific research, it's a paper, right, that gets put out there maybe years after the study. And one thing that I'm really proud of that our team did is that with those preliminary results, getting them out where people can see them, and also including like what we learned too. And if people are interested in taking a look at, what did we do? What did we learn? How did people respond to it? What are we going to change for next time? They can find that right on our website. And I think in the last podcast we provided a link to that.
Yeah,
But that's rare. I mean,
yeah.
that is really rare. Brent, yeah.
I think we need to make sure that that's included again because
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt to have it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, and we did learn a lot from that first
Yes.
phase, and did make a lot of changes. And
Yep.
some of the things we're talking about, like the consent form, making sure that we were more transparent. We had some information on who can participate and who can't, but it wasn't as clear cut as some people were experiencing when they were going through the process. So updating that so that we could be more transparent. The programs, we made a lot of changes to the programs based on what we heard from people, just to try to make it more accommodating and meet their needs.
Yep.
And this project, the end goal, we'll have information on the two programs, how well they do, what people like, what people don't like. Eventually, the goal is to take those things and package them so that they could be left in community, and community can just pick up, have the tools they need to say, hey, I want to run a self-management program over, at my church or my place of worship, or the VFW, where have it, and to have the resources available to where they could do that. But first we have to see how worthwhile are the programs and what is needed before you get to that steps.
Yep.
Anything you want to add to that before we start wrapping up? Like if you, like I like to end with me talking always at the end, right? Let's be honest. And it's funny to hear me talk because people who knew me grew up like I never talked.
Right.
Now I'm making up for it now. But anything you'd like to add as we wrap up here?
Well, I think the last point that Brent made is really, really important because, you know, if we're looking at health disparities and where people are not getting care or they're getting, you know, worse care, that to be able to have a program like this, you know, and have it in a setting where people are feeling more welcome, more, you know, this is, I feel better here. I think that's really important, you know, and we've taken that into consideration on like where we have our interventions so that people are comfortable. But I think that's a really interesting and powerful statement to me. It's like, okay, here, now we can have it in your church, in your temple, in your, you know, your community center. Um, that gets me excited as we, you know, as we do this work. That's a real motivator for me.
What about you, Brent? Anything you'd like to add as we wrap up here?
Just that I'm excited for that too, but it's a little ways away
It's,
for the final vision, and just that how appreciative I am that you invite me and Doug here to share our story and have this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, this is the best part about it because, and that's kind of what I wanted to end is showing up.
Mhm.
Brent, you drove over an hour or so to get here, and then you have to drive through traffic. But I know you've shown up for community. And then it's the way you both show up, and it's the way your team shows up. And I'm hoping that as not people in community are just watching, but as you go back to your team and as you go back to institutions, because I've seen your work being
Mhm.
recognized as groundbreaking, that people will see that you show up with intellectual humility, and you really show up. And when you come to events, you're participating. I know you guys leave swag, but I know you're also very available about talking to people. And if you can't help them with per se the study or whatever, you're
Mhm.
really good about using your network
Mhm.
and kind of referring them out. So again, as we go on this journey, I'm looking for those results. I'm so happy that you took the time to be here. And I am Dr. Rhonda Marie Chakolis, and this has been For Your Health.